Just so you know. Now I don't have to announce that. Okay, we are going to be recording this. We are going to take a break about halfway through so you get to stretch. However, for those of you that are here in the room, if you want to get up and stretch in between, it does not bother me, just so you know. Just do what makes you feel comfortable. So, but we are going to be recording this. Also, for those of you in doing this on Zoom, if you could write questions or comments you have in the chat for now, and then we'll take some questions live, I guess, later on. Okay. But, oh, got it. Got it. Okay. And I do want to thank Janet for all of her help getting this set up, because this is not my forte. So I'm going to share our
Into life options.
Oh,
and if everybody on Zoom would mute their computer, I'd appreciate that. So this is what we're going to be talking about today: advanced healthcare planning and what you need to know to get started. First of all, let me say, don't obsess over this. I have a friend who has been writing hers for 3 years because she wants to get it just right. And then, of course, something changes, so she's got to change it. Don't do that. We'll talk about the different pieces, and hopefully you're going to have the confidence and also the motivation to at least get started on doing your advanced directive. I also want to say I am not an expert. I am not a clinician. And there are a lot of things that change very quickly, so I don't give out too much information about facilities or specific medications or specific treatments, because in the 10 years I've been doing this, things have changed a lot. And I don't want to give out any wrong information or any information that you think you can use in another year or two, because who knows what's going to happen. So to get started, I'm going to show a slide. It's a little bit out of date, and I hope you don't mind, but I do believe it's still relevant. I will show this. This worked before. Okay. I'm not sure why this isn't moving. Hold on, folks.
This is technology making our lives easier.
Yeah.
Arrow keys aren't.
Well, we're back. Okay.
I think we're just gonna have to reopen this. Oh, I see.
Okay, in the meantime, we are going to be looking at the booklet that you hopefully have picked up, My End of Life Decisions, an Advanced Planning Guide and Toolkit.
Let's go from beginning.
And there we go. Here's that wonderful slide. Not only is it out of date, it didn't even want to come out. What do you think? As far as I know anyway, and I told you I'm not an expert, I don't know of anybody that is not going to be dying in the next few years. I should say, we're not all dying in the next few years, but that it will be happening to us. Who knows though, in another 5 or 10 years, whether that might change, and I may have to do this whole workshop over again. But for now, if we're all going to be dying eventually, let's get prepared for it. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it, so we make it easier on ourselves and our loved ones. Now, this is what they say is our contemporary end-of-life experience. Do you like, if this pertains to you, most people want to die at home, surrounded by their loved ones. And most people would choose improved quality of life over interventions that prolong their life, but reduce their quality. And that's something all of us have to decide for ourselves. But the reality is, people mostly die in the intensive care unit in a hospital, or possibly in a nursing facility. And a lot of people get a lot of treatments that really aren't that beneficial. But somehow the doctors or medical providers seem to think we should try them. And that's just the reality of it. So the best thing we can do is to plan ahead so that we can be at home with loved ones, so we can manage our pain. And there might be other considerations. We want to have our spiritual values respected and our regular values in life. An Advanced Healthcare Directive can help us do all that. So what is an Advanced Healthcare Directive? First of all, it's the plan. And I don't know about you folks, but in my work life especially, we make plans, and we set goals, and we did all kinds of things, only to find out a few months later it was not going to work, right? We had to tweak them a little bit. So I'm not here to say that if you do this advanced directive, things are going to work out perfectly for you, okay? That's okay. We have a couple more people coming in, come right through. But it is a plan. And as we also know, if we don't have any plans, sometimes life is just too chaotic, right? So let's do it. Now, typically, the term of a living will and medical durable power of attorney is used in a lawyer situation, and it may include other documents. The advanced directive, if you do it as the one document, has both of those pieces in it. Now, how many of you already have an advanced directive? Okay, I see a few.
What about unofficial?
Unofficial, well, we'll get to that, I guess. Anybody have a living will and durable power of attorney? Okay, so you're calling that your advanced directive. Good. They're equal, at least in our state.
Probably some redundancy there.
Yeah, but you don't need both of them if they agree. Okay, so we're going to talk about advanced directives just because it's an easier way to do it, I think. And I don't know how many people in Zoom land have one. Hopefully a few anyway. The next question, of course, is how many of you have looked at it in the past year or two?
Before the meeting today.
Oh, we have one person who got prepared and she looked at hers. Okay, that's almost cheating. But you know, it's hard because I know I did mine way back in the 1990s. I was so good. And I patted myself on the back. I did my advanced directive with a lawyer, along with my estate planning and stuff like that. And I thought, it's done, right? And then I started going to some of these courses and teaching them and realized I hadn't looked at it in 10 years. Pulled it out, and not to my surprise necessarily, but I realized my two proxies I hardly ever talk to. They're back in Massachusetts and I'm here in New Mexico, which is in and of itself not a bad thing, but it still make it harder, and I don't talk to them very much. And there are some other things that I had to change as well. And now with COVID, you were stuck home for a good year or so. I thought maybe it's time I looked at it again. And guess what? I had to change some things again because the medical community has changed a bit. Now, for those of you who haven't done one yet, there are a lot of reasons why you probably haven't done it. And I won't embarrass you by asking, but these are ones that we've heard over and over again as we give these courses. One is, I don't have time to complete one. I'm too busy. And probably those of us that are retired, that's true, because I'm much busier now that I'm retired than I ever was when I was working. Some people, they're too young. Why would they even think about death? They're only, 70 or 80. And I do get that. Now, some people also are a little superstitious. If I talk about this, I'm sure to die. Have any of you heard of Gail Rubin? She calls herself the doyenne of death. She does a lot of different workshops. One of her favorite sayings is, if you talk about sex, you don't get pregnant. But if you talk about funerals and death, you don't die either. So, okay, so that one's crossed off. God will take care of me. I can't have any argument with that. Except to tell you the truth, I think God needs a little bit of help sometimes. And we can figure out how to live and die with our family around us. Oh, it's too complicated to fill out. Well, I'm really hoping by the end of this afternoon, you're going to say, yes, it's going to take some work, but it's not that complicated, really. And my favorite, my spouse, my son, my daughter, my brother, whatever. They know me so well, they know exactly what I want. Have you actually told them what you want? So many people think just because you live with somebody, they must know everything. But you'll find out that they don't. And I can use myself as an example to tell you the truth. My mother was really good. She had her advanced directive all done. And my sister and I, we went through it with her. And she says, I don't want any extraordinary measures. I don't want to live like a vegetable. Well, that's pretty clear, right? No. Once I started teaching these courses, I realized, what kind of vegetable was my mother talking about? What did she mean by extraordinary measures? So I went and talked with her again. And trust me, it's hard to talk to your parents or loved ones about this. I have a much easier time talking to all of you because I don't know you. And I can walk out that door and you don't have to even pay attention to me. Talking to your family is much harder. And you know what? I realized I didn't have the same idea of what extraordinary measures were or what it really meant for her to be a vegetable, as she said. Good thing I had that talk. Luckily for me, my mother died in bed and I didn't have to make any of those decisions. But still, it really brought home to me that you've got to talk to your family and your friends. And if somebody else has any experience like this, maybe we can talk about it at the break or when we have a question period. So why do we need advanced directives, right? Well, you could just talk to somebody and tell them everything. But sometimes that doesn't work. And it does help with planning because it makes you think about all of this. For one thing, it helps clarify your priorities and maybe what wishes you have, what brings you joy. I don't know about you guys, but when I was working 40, 60, whatever hours a week, you go to work, you come home, make supper, maybe go to bed, start the whole day over again. I didn't stop and reflect on anything. And it wasn't until I was doing my advanced directive that I actually thought about, what do I want out of this life while I'm still here? And it does have legal authority. And it resolves a lot of questions and often increases the support you're going to get from your family and medical community. Because you've thought this out and you've actually come to some conclusions and shared it with them. Now, I talk about the family a lot. I don't know if some of your family members are always on the same page that you are on. Doesn't happen in my family all that much. And so if you have this all written out, with any luck, it's going to minimize disagreements or conflicts. I've read books and stories about people who are in the ICU. One son is on one side of the bed, the daughter's on the other, or it could be the other way around. And they have different ideas of what should be done. If you have this written out, you should get what you want, not what they're fighting over. And so that kind of brings peace of mind, I would say, to you and to your family members. I've had several people in my different classes say, you know, it was so good that my mother or father or whoever had an advanced directive. I didn't have to guess what they wanted because they didn't talk to me about it, but I had it written down. And it brought me peace of mind to know that I was doing what he or she wanted. So there is some value in that. And maybe it helps prepare for the future a little bit, because you can write in your advanced directive what you might want in the future. If this happens, then this is what I would want. It may not be legal today. We don't know. Medical aid in dying wasn't legal 2 years ago here. And look what's happened. So you never know, and you can write these things down. Okay, who should have an advanced healthcare directive? If you ask me, everyone over 18. And probably there are some 16 and 17-year-olds that should have one too. But we don't know what's going to happen. You don't want to wait till you're old or sick, because you might not have the ability or the capacity to write down everything you want. So don't wait. Also, a lot of times what you want and what you hope that people will do for you or not do for you, that's going to change during your life. You know, what you want as an 18-year-old going off to college may not be the same thing when that person gets married, has kids, retires from a job, whatever. So many things can happen in our life. And there's nothing to say that what you write down now can't be changed. And that's what I keep on telling my friend. Write it down. You can change it later. It's okay. So we're going to go through some steps now of what you should do as you think about writing your advanced directive. First thing, sit back for a moment. Think about, what are your values? What gives you meaning and joy to your life? Have they changed over the years? I know mine have. Volleyball used to be my big thing. Hurt my right knee, can't play volleyball the same way I used to. Had to switch to golf. But that's okay. And what brings real meaning to my life now is coming and talking to people like you, to tell you the truth. It sounds a little cliche, but it really means a lot to me to have you folks come and maybe get something more out of your life. Now, that nice workbook that I was telling you about, and hopefully those of you doing the Zoom will have it there too. Those of you that just came in, if you'd like to get a package, you're welcome to. If you go to page 17, there's what they call a values worksheet. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you have to fill it all out. To tell you the truth, I haven't. But I did go through these items when I was making my advanced directive, because it triggered a lot of things of what do I want? Why do I want it? So you can see there's a little graph there. How important are the following items? And I encourage you to go down them and decide, is living as long as possible, regardless quality of life, is that important to you? or not so important? Being mentally alert, is that important to you? Or maybe not so much. Avoiding expensive care, that can be a real big consideration maybe for some people. And when you get done with that part, they've got another 2 pages for you to write in. Again, I'm not asking that you fill this in necessarily, but you may see that there's a dotted lines. You can cut these out and actually add them to your advanced directive. Or use them as a start for your conversation with your proxy, perhaps with your medical provider, or your friends and family. It's a lot of good questions that a lot of times we do not think about. For example, do you want to be placed in a nursing home? Or is that really one thing you really want to avoid? But maybe your family doesn't have the means or the housing to keep you with them. So maybe you have to write down that, okay, if it won't happen, I will accept that. Several of my friends have gone through all kinds of guilt and mental torture because they ended up having to put their mother or father in a nursing home. Very tough, but they had no other options. Wouldn't it have been nice if the mother or father had said, if at all possible, keep me at home. If you can't, that's okay. And that's something you can do for your family. So now a big question here is determining the other who in this whole equation. And that's going to be your healthcare agent, healthcare proxy, substitute decision maker, power of attorney for healthcare. Oh, there's all kinds of names. You could even probably make something up if you want. The important thing is who you choose. And this is really important. And there's a lot of videos out there. And if you go to the conversationproject.org, they have a whole section on how to choose your healthcare proxy. They have to be over 18 years of age. Should be mentally competent. And I do realize that's a little subjective, but you know what I mean. Bigger thing, they have to agree to take the responsibility. And what does that mean? You have to talk to them, because otherwise they can't agree to it. You're gonna probably get very tired of all my stories, but they do have a point. And we had a friend who asked my husband and me to be his proxy. We said, sure. And I made him fill out all the forms. And I said, okay, now you have to send it to your 2 sons so they know that when the time comes, and the 2 sons lived way over in Massachusetts, and he was here in New Mexico with us. And I said, you have to make sure that they know what's going on so that when we make some decisions, they're not going to come flying in a rage over across the country. He said, I don't think so. I'm just going to send it to them in the mail. Yeah, I heard oh boy. And I said, no, Marty, I want you to talk to them. If you want me to be your proxy, you've got to make sure that it's okay with everybody else. And that's as far in that story as I'm going to go. But it's so important that you have somebody and they'll take responsibility. In the end, he ended up filling out a form that we're going to talk about later. And he put down his son as proxy without even talking to us. He was in the hospital. The nurse said, here, sign this, fill this in. And the son didn't even have any idea. We didn't have any idea that we weren't the proxy. So you really need to talk. Secondly, that person must be willing to follow your wishes, not their own. And sometimes that's very hard to do, especially with close family members. They think they know what's best for you. You probably have some people in your family that tell you that all the time, right? My husband is always telling me what I should be doing. But I also know that he, as my proxy, will do what I want when it comes to this. So make sure that they're willing to follow your wishes. And sometimes they are not going to want the same things that you would want, but that's okay. They don't have to, because this is your life and maybe your death. And again, these people may change over time. One thing, they get older, they're no longer able, perhaps, to be your proxy. Or their whole value system may change. They may say, we're unstable. Is that the same thing as mentally incompetent? We'll see. But you can change your proxies over time. In fact, I have a friend who is one of my proxies, had been for several years now, and she moved back to California to be near children. And she said, maybe you want to find a different proxy, somebody who lives closer. Now, that's not one of the requirements that you see here, that they live close to you, but it sure is helpful to have an actual person talking to your actual medical provider about what you want. And so I was able to find another proxy, and actually found somebody 30 years younger. So hopefully I will outlive this person. But it can change, and all you have to do is change it in your advanced directive and sign it and make sure everybody knows about it. Okay, so now we get to the point of, you've got your proxy. What do you want? What treatment options might you want to consider? My treatment is some water, if you don't mind. Now, 10 years ago, when I started doing this, we used to go through all of these different options and do the pros and cons. And as I've gotten older and wiser, I realize I don't always know all the pros and cons anymore. Some of these things have really changed over the years. But if you have specific doubts about some particular treatment that you don't want it, or you want to make sure your doctor always does it, you can certainly put that into your advanced directive. But I'd like to share with you in this handy dandy book that we have, on page 22, they have decisions for specific therapies. And you'll see it's kind of a graph. And it's, yes, I want this all the time, anytime. No, I don't want you to even consider doing it. Or as I've put on mine, I'm willing to have a trial period for most of these things. Because if they can do something about the antibiotics in a few days, it's usually 10 days, I guess, and it will help me to go home because it's cured perhaps the infection I have or something, then I'll do it. If I'm going to have to be on something that makes me sick to my stomach every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to think again, is this what I really want? And a lot of it's going to depend on other parts of my life, but you just don't know. So I always put trial period. And then in that nice big space down at the bottom, you can set some parameters. I'll try the antibiotics for one run and see what happens. And then if my doctor says, you know, just a little bit more time and I think we can lick this. Okay, maybe we can do this. Now remember though, with an advanced directive, it only becomes effective when you can no longer speak for yourself. So that's why you have to have this written down and maybe talk to your proxy and say, you know me now, you know what I want. You talk to the doctor and see if what he or she decides is appropriate. is what I would want. Because you're not going to be able to speak at this point. You're not going to be able to say, don't give me this or don't give me that. Okay, and then you sign it and date it. And look at this, you can tear it out of the book and put it with your advanced directive. Okay. Now, there are some other considerations that you might want to add to your advanced directive, or maybe not. You know, when are you going to go into hospice? Do you want to be at home or in a facility? Do you want companionship? Are you one of these people that would just like to be left alone? Maybe organ donation or preferences for last rites is part of what you want to do. Okay, we're going to switch gears just a little bit. And I can unshare this, right? We're going to give this a try. And we're going to look at it says optional advanced directive. And we're going to look through it because we just discussed most of it, okay? Now, somebody asked me today, and I had never paid any attention to this. It says optional. The reason it says optional is that New Mexico does not have a specific form you have to use. And so this is one that if you went to Compassion and Choices and looked up New Mexico, this is the one that they happen to have. And since it's an easy one, this is the one I use when I teach these classes. But you know, a lot of the hospitals have their own. I know Presbyterian does. If you look up Advanced Directive, Advanced Healthcare Directive on Google or whatever, you can come up with 6, 10 different forms that you can use. And I would suggest that you look at a lot of them, because this may not be the one that's for you. A lot of them have other things. And in fact, I have a sample here on the table from 5 Wishes. You may have heard of that. A lot of places use it. And so I brought a sample copy just so you could look through it, and you can go to it on your computer. I believe now they're charging everybody for it, except for the sample one. So you may or may not want to use it for that reason. It may be have too many words for it. I tried it and I ended up crossing out half of it because it's not what I wanted. So that's why you really need to do a little bit of research, or you can just listen to me, whatever you like. So let's turn it over. You notice that part 1 says power of attorney for healthcare. And this is where you put that person that you chose as your proxy. You have a place for designation of agent and how to get hold of that person. Now, if he or she is not willing for some reason or unavailable at a time when you need that person to make decisions for you, you can have alternates. They give you a place for 2 more. To be honest, I don't think you want more than that. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a circus when you have decisions to be made. One person said to me, but I've got 5. Shouldn't I put them all down? My first look, oh, I see somebody else shaking their head. No, can you imagine if they weren't all thinking exactly the same way, like what is best for me? You might never get anything done. You don't want that. You may not even want any of your children or your brother or even your spouse to be your proxy. You need somebody, remember I always said, willing to take the responsibility and willing to do what you want. And I hear from a lot of people saying, well, I tried talking to my kids and all I hear is, they don't want to hear about it. Are you sure you want that person to be your proxy? I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe you do. Or you can approach it with, you know, I love you so much. I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't put you in that position. I don't really know if that would work or not, but it's worth giving it a try. So We've got our proxies listed here. What are you going to let them do? Obtain and review medical reports and your records so they can help make a better informed decision? You want them to make all your decisions? Do you want them to maybe move you from whatever facility you're in if that facility does not agree with your wishes? If you have other things that you think you would like them to do, you can put that down here. Now, we just had a discussion in the End of Life Options New Mexico meeting that I was at, saying, is this a violation of HIPAA? You know, we hear that all the time, don't we? Somebody went to Compassionate Choices and their legal department said, no, if you've written this in your advanced directive, it should count. Oh, we're on page 2 of the optional healthcare form. Okay, we're talking about HIPAA. So, but you may want to talk with your healthcare provider about that. It never hurts to have an extra piece of paper attached to your directive. But as far as I'm concerned, if you give that authority in your advanced directive, it should be okay. Until I find out otherwise. Okay, when does it become effective? Well, frankly, I'd want it to be effective as soon as I could no longer speak for myself. And so I've checked that box. And again, this is open a little bit to interpretation. The thing is, as long as you can speak, your proxy is not going to speak for you anyway. And then what is the agent's obligation? To make healthcare decisions that I put in this next part and determine them to be in my best interest. That's real important. Now, some of the forms do not include the next piece, and you may not want it in yours either, in which case you can just cross it out. Nomination of guardian. If you're afraid that somehow you're going to be put under a guardianship of somebody else, you can keep it. If you've talked to your proxy, that proxy is going to be your guardian for healthcare. Okay. Again, whatever you don't want in it, just cross it out and initial it. So if we turn the page over, we have instructions for healthcare, part 2. Let's just go through these a little bit. End of life decisions. And I'm going to just say, generally speaking, they don't give you a lot of room in this one to write extra notes. And you can cure that by having an addendum that you add to your advanced directive. So let's see, say part 2, number 6, end of life decisions. If you have more that you want to say why you chose a particular decision, you can say right there at the bottom, see the addendum for number 6 and write down what else you want to say. But this is pretty good, and I really want people to pay attention to the end of life decisions right there. And for anybody on Zoom that doesn't have this in front of them, I'm going to just read it kind of quickly if you guys don't mind. If I'm unable to make or communicate decisions regarding my health care, or if I have an incurable or irreversible condition, or I become unconscious and to a degree of medical certainty, I will not regain consciousness, or the likely risks and burdens of treatment would outweigh the expected benefits, then I will direct my healthcare providers and others to withhold or withdraw treatment in accordance with the choice that I've initialed below. And it's written a little bit differently in different forms. So if all of those conditions are met, you would choose not to prolong life, or no, keep on trying within the limits of generally accepted standards. Or You can let your agent decide. So whatever feels most comfortable for you, this is what you choose. And as I say, if you want to explain it a little bit more, write an addendum. Artificial nutrition and hydration. Again, if you meet all of these other prerequisites here, if you've chosen not to prolong life, you don't want to have artificial nutrition, or maybe you still do, but you're not going to do anything else to prolong your life. Same thing with artificial hydration. Perhaps if you met all these requirements, that's enough for you. Okay, so you don't want to continue with your nutrition or hydration. For me, the big one is relief from pain. I'm not good with pain. And I'd be even worse if I had worse pain. So it says, regardless of the choices I've made in this form, and except for anything I happen to write down here, I direct that they keep me clean, comfortable, and free of pain or discomfort, so that my dignity is maintained, even if this kind of care hastens my death. And I'd like to just give an example. Some people with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, they actually need morphine in order to help them breathe better. I know my mother did, and the amount of morphine she needed kept on increasing. When she went into hospice, the first thing I asked the hospice nurses was, will you give my mother excuse me, enough morphine so that she's comfortable? And they said, of course. They looked at me as though I had two heads. And I said, well, wait a minute. It's not of course. You hear all these stories all the time where people are in pain and they only give them a certain amount. And they have to wait for the medical provider to adjust the amount up. I'm thinking that this doesn't happen as often anymore. I'd like to think so anyway. Most of the people that have come to me during these classes and said, my mother was in pain and they wouldn't give it to her. I said, oh, well, how long ago was that? Oh, 10 years. I really think I have not heard anybody in the last year or so say that the nurses no longer will give you or no longer keep the morphine or other pain relievers from somebody. Now, I could be wrong. I haven't examined all of the different facilities and hospices, but I think you'll find that for most people, they will give you as much if that's what you want. Some people would rather have the pain than to suddenly be sedated. Your choice, okay? Now this next one, the anatomical gift designation. Again, that's not in a lot of the different forms. And if it doesn't pertain to you, if you don't want anything to do with that, cross it off. However, if you're an organ donor, you may want to choose one of these. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of this, right? Let's go on the back page, other wishes. If you wish to write your own instructions, or if you wish to add to these instructions, you can do so. And actually in this one, it says, add additional sheets if you want to. The next part, the primary physician. That's a difficult one these days, isn't it? I don't know about you guys, but I've had changes probably every couple of years. And in this state, it's really hard to find a doctor sometimes. And so we have nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. What I've done on my particular advanced directive is I wrote down any medical provider in the health system that I'm in that will go along and support my wishes. Now, that doesn't mean my healthcare system isn't going to merge with somebody else next year and I still have to change it, but it gives it a little bit more latitude for you. And maybe you don't even want to put that down. But at least if you have your healthcare system written in there, they should be able to find your records. Okay, and then there's the effect of the copy. It becomes even if you have copies, it's just like the original. And here's the important part, I think, too, is you can revoke the optional Advanced Healthcare Directive at any time. Rewrite it, make changes. If you do, though, you should promptly notify your healthcare provider and any institution you might be receiving care from, and anybody that you've given copies to. How good is your memory? If you give copies to people, you might want to write them down who you gave them to. Okay. Then the end of it is signing it and dating it. It's optional here in New Mexico to have witnesses. Personally, I think it's a good idea. That way, there's less chance that people are going to say, oh, she didn't know what she was doing. That isn't really her signature, whatever. But you do not need it notarized either. But if you're going to your bank and they still do it, or you're going to your lawyer, it doesn't hurt to have it notarized. Okay, I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. Yay. Except now it doesn't want to move again. Stop share. I shouldn't have played around with it, sorry. Okay. You know what? I think we're going to just stop here. We're going to keep recording, so try not to talk near the mic, and have a little bit of a break. You guys have been listening a long time, and I'm very proud of you. You haven't fallen asleep or anything. I don't know about the Zoom people. They can do what they want. But so let's take a 5-minute break or so, and then we'll continue. And I'll get this set up again. How's that?
There's water back here if anyone would like some, and there's a donation jar should you want to. If you have water with or without.
Okay, and I also would like to mention for those of you in the room, if you'd like to sign in on our sign-in sheet, if you'd like to receive our newsletter from End of Life Options New Mexico. Also, the librarians were very kind to actually bring out some of the books that they have here in this library that you could borrow. Okay. Okay, we're back again. Okay, we're starting. Okay, we've done part of this slide, choose the appropriate form and complete the forms. One thing that was brought up in the break that I'd like to mention that I forgot to mention is that if you're on Medicare, you can request an appointment with your medical provider, and I believe it's for 20 to 30 minutes as an end-of-life issues discussion. Now, you have to make sure when you set up an appointment, though, that this is what you tell them it's for, so it's coded the correct way in your insurance. Because as we all know, we all get about 2 questions when we get to see our medical provider. I probably shouldn't slander the medical community, but sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about distributing. We've got this all done now. And as we know, it's not going to be perfect, and it probably won't fit every situation, but it is important that we distribute it and keep it in a safe place. What you don't want to do is hide it away, either in a safety deposit box or in the bottom drawer of your desk where you've piled everything else for the past 2 years. Keep it where somebody can find it. Also, make sure your proxy, your healthcare agent, has the copy. Your healthcare provider should have a copy. If you have 2 healthcare providers that you see on a regular basis, such as my husband, who's has a cardiologist as well as his primary, and they're in two separate systems, of course. Because they don't always talk to each other, make sure they both have one for their records. I also gave one to my brother and sister who are not my proxies because, well, just because, but I want them to know what I think and what I want. So there's no argument when the time comes. And there's lots of other places you can put them. I actually have them in my glove compartment of my cars. And if we have time at the end, I'll share the story of why that's a good idea and why I was so glad that I took my own advice. Now, remember those magnets that a few people have picked up, and sorry about you guys on Zoom, you don't get one. They are wonderful for keeping your advanced directive on your refrigerator or in some place like that. I don't have kids, so I don't have grandkids, so I don't have all these cute little pictures. I've got advanced directives on my refrigerator. And as I started to mention just before the break, why don't you put on your copy of the advanced directive who you've given it to and where people can find it, so that if you make any changes, they are changed on all the copies. I can't imagine what would happen if there's 4 or 5 different copies all over the place and somehow they all come to the hospital at once. Well, actually, I do know what happens. One with the latest date on it will get the most service. So we have these resources. We've been going through the Compassion and Choices booklet. We just learned that it's hard to get it, download it on your computer. I'm not sure why. But if you got the packets from the library, we have a nice postcard that you can send if you need more copies. And actually, I'm going to leave a few copies with the library for people to pick up if you like. Yes.
Is there an electronic version of this on the Compassion and Choices website?
Not on the the question was, for if you couldn't hear, is there an electronic version? As far as I know, not on the compassionandchoices.org. However, there is a site called mydirectives.com that you can go to. And actually, some of the insurance companies have it as part of their like Medicare Advantage plans. At least I know my Humana one does. And you can fill it in on form. You have to register for it and get a password and all that stuff, but you can fill it in there, save it there, print it off so you can pass it along to people and make changes if you want. Good questions. Now there's new dementia tools, and in the new booklets on page 23, they have actually included a lot of what they have on the site at Compassion and Choices, because we know dementia is going to be a real big problem probably for a lot of us. What I like about this is it goes through a lot of scenarios. You know, when you first get dementia, maybe you can still recognize people, you can still bathe, you can still do a lot of stuff. Well, at that point, you might not want any other measures done for you. However, as it progresses and you no longer can do things for yourself and you're no longer interested in food, you may have different choices that you want to make. And you can, again, cut these pages out, add them to your advanced directive, and they are as you proceed. Okay. Also at Compassion and Choices, they have what they call a diagnosis decoder. And I just threw this in. It really has nothing to do with the advanced directives necessarily, but it certainly is helpful to help you think of the questions you want to ask at your doctor's appointment. And you can actually pick, is it just general? Is there cancer involved? Is there dementia? And it's a very good site. One of the things that Compassion and Choices did, and I'm sure some of the other sites that have forms, when COVID hit, we realized that there might be exceptions to what you generally would want out of your advanced directive. And if you got COVID very badly, would you have different views on things? Would you want to go to the hospital? Or would you just say, I want to stay at home, maybe just get oxygen? Or now they have a couple of new meds that if you recognize that you have COVID right away, that you can take. And actually, I think this was done before they had those meds. But these are things that are only done if you have COVID. So it's not even looked at if you don't have COVID, but it is something else you can do. And for some reason, this one you can do online and print it out.
From your website?
From the, from Compassion and Choices website, I'm sorry. And I know that there are some, if you look it up in on Google and everything, there's a lot of other ones available as well. Other resources. In your packets, you should have one of these nice bright green pieces of paper. And this is our New Mexico medical orders for scope of treatment, or most. We have it in bright green. If you make copies and they come out on white paper, it's still valid, just so you know. Different states have different colors. They have different names for this, but basically it's for EMTs and other medical personnel. I don't know if the word valid is really what I want to use, but because you do it with your medical provider, you go over these questions and that medical provider has to sign. And therefore, EMTs and other emergency personnel definitely pay much more attention to this and follow this because it's doctor's orders. And frankly, if they've been called, they don't have time to read and look for your advanced directive necessarily and read the whole thing. If you want, take a look at it, it has some very simple emergency responses. Do you want CPR or not? Do you want to go to a hospital or not? You'll notice that these are very almost black and white type of instructions. A lot of times this is only used with people who have chronic conditions, where the EMTs, it is not a surprise that they find you on the floor unconscious. But more and more facilities, more and more healthcare entities have people sign these, even if you don't fall into that designation. I know when I went for my wellness checkup for Medicare, they put one of these in my hand and said, do you want to sign this now? And I said, no, I really don't have any chronic diseases at this point, and I teach this stuff, so I'll know when I want to sign it. And he said, oh, well, could you let me know what I should be telling people? So you may not have these available with your healthcare provider, and you may not need it right away. Another good thing about it, though, is that it has room on the back for your proxy. Again, if the EMTs come in and see this on your refrigerator, and you can take another magnet if you want, they're going to know that they can just look on the back and notify your proxy of what's happening. And so that starts the whole procedure a little bit faster. Some of these other brochures and everything, we've got extra copies of them, and they probably are in your packet as well. So what do we do? You've now done everything, right? You've sat back, you've decided what your values are. You've picked a proxy or not. You've filled out a form, hopefully. So what do you need to do? Have that conversation. That is probably the most important piece of all this. And I can't say it often enough. Have it with your proxy. Have it with your medical provider. Have it with your family. When I was first doing this, they said, a good time to have this discussion is around the Thanksgiving table. One of my colleagues said, are you kidding me? Nobody's going to want to listen to this around the Thanksgiving table. So pick a good time when people might listen to you. Is it difficult? Is it hard? Yeah. We tried talking to my husband's sister. We had gotten 3 words out of our mouth and she was crying already. Need I say that she's not the proxy on either one of our advanced directives, because I don't think she could stand to do it. She didn't want to hear it. Kids don't want to hear it. You may have to say it more than once, probably more than 3 or 4 times, but do it. Now, I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes, even though this is not part of the advanced directive, but because I just feel so strongly that all New Mexicans need to know about end-of-life options, because we just had that bill passed a year ago. I just want to quickly run through some of the end-of-life options. This is different from your advanced directive, however, because your advanced directive is effective when you can no longer speak. Probably 9 times out of 10, you're unconscious, or you may be so fuzzy with meds that you can't make any decisions. Most of these, you need to be competent, you need to be able to communicate. So one of them is pursuing life-sustaining treatment. You may be one of those people that want everything done. You want to have that newest pill treatment. You may even want to be in one of the studies. Or you could be one of those people that you've been through so much already that it wasn't making a difference. It could be making your life even more miserable. And so you would discontinue, or you might just not want to try something. It's interesting though, because you're still conscious and can speak. So you can change your mind, even though you've told somebody. Like my cousin, who's had several different cancers, all kinds of treatment. And she said, Jan, I just can't take it anymore. I'm not going to do anything more. That was 3 years ago. The cancer came back. She decided, maybe one more round of radiation. She called me and said, Jan, are you mad at me for changing my mind? No, that's what this is all about. This is why we have options. And of course you can change your mind. And isn't it great that your life is such that you want to change your mind at this point? You might have 6 months prognosis and go into hospice. There's voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Lovingly call it VSED. A little bit difficult. It's when you decide that you just can't handle things anymore. You may not qualify for hospice even because you might have Parkinson's or starting to get Alzheimer's or whatever. You're still competent, but you know you're not going to reach that 6-month part before you're going to be so bad off that you can't make any decisions. And I have done more explanation of this in my previous talk, and I can come back and do it again if you like. Palliative sedation, when you are sedated because you're in such pain or so anxious or delusional, you could be hurting yourself. And so you're given small amounts of sedation until those symptoms are manageable. And medical aid in dying is our latest. And this is basically what it is. Terminally ill, that's 6 months or less if everything goes the way medical records show. Mentally capable adult with a prognosis of 6 months or less may request an authorized provider. And now in our state, that can be nurse practitioners or physician assistants. It doesn't have to be a doctor, which they can self-administer to bring about a peaceful death.
Does that include like alternative healthcare providers?
Yes, yeah, but you need two providers in order to go along to progress with this process. You have to have two to qualify you as terminally ill, mentally competent. We also say a resident of New Mexico. We left it a little vague so that, because that could change often. But yes, so you can have alternative physicians as long as they're certified, okay, for one of it. These are some excellent resources, even if you can't download the form, and I'm going to try to figure out why, to get more information. And if you know of any other groups that might like a talk on either advanced directives, end of life options, or what I call my combo talk, feel free to get in touch with us and we'll try to set something up. But for right now, oops, we're going to stop sharing and open it up for questions and or a couple of comments if you have some comments.
Pause
Yes.
the recording now?
Yes. Oh, well, I don't know. If it's not a personal question, I suppose a lot of good questions come up. So why don't we keep on recording? And after about 15 minutes, we'll shut off the recording if you have something more personal that you don't want recorded for everybody to hear later on. Yes.
I would like to clarify about the website Compassion and Choices. When she says that's not downloadable, normally it is. You can go to Compassion and Choices website. There's lots of good information on there and links you can click. The problem with it just now is that this particular book that you have in front of you, the larger book, My End of Life Decisions, the links are not working for it. They're in the process of, they just updated this in April, and it may be that those are not uploaded yet onto the website. They probably will be in the near future. So if you go to that site and try to get more copies of this, you can't, but you can fill out one of those postcards and get more copies of this booklet.
Okay, for those of you on Zoom that might not have heard all of that, should I just repeat it real quickly, that the site that they say that you can download and order a copy doesn't seem to be working, but it's very likely because this is a brand new edition of the book. I got you the new books. And hopefully they will have it up and running soon, but use the postcard that should be around, and we'll leave more here at the library. Also, we'll leave some extra booklets for you. But it does have a lot more information on that site if you're willing to dig through it. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Janet.
I'm wondering about proximity of your proxy and how important that is.
Well, you know, it's not as important as it was maybe 10 years ago. Now we have FaceTime and Zooming and all kinds of electronics that we can use. So people can be further away. However, they say, I've heard in different webinars, that if you can have somebody who is fairly close that can get to you within, let's say, half a day, it's better to have that face-to-face contact with your medical provider or with the hospital personnel. They can just be more of an advocate. They cannot be ignored as easily as sometimes I've heard stories about. But it's not absolutely necessary. And sometimes you might want a person that you feel is a great proxy, but is far away, but also have somebody close by, and so that they're working together in a way. Yes, Pam.
As I was looking through the materials, I noticed that there is a reference to facilities that may be religious-based, like say a Catholic hospital or something like that. That there's a form to fill out that says that you want your wishes followed and not necessarily the hospital's ethics followed or religious beliefs followed. And that you could be moved from that facility to another facility should they not want to follow your wishes. Have you found that has happened? Has that been a problem?
Okay, let me just repeat that question too. There's a form that asks for you to sign that says you might want to be moved from whatever facility you're taken to if that facility will not honor your wishes. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure how that has worked. I do know that's becoming more and more of a problem as more and more faith-based hospitals tend to take over the smaller local hospitals a lot of times. And it could become a problem if you don't have any other hospitals around. No. I really don't know any statistics or how that has worked. I do want to hold this book up and recommend it. It's Finished Strong by Barbara Coombs Lee. And the reason I recommend it is like that booklet that we gave you, she is very practical and it gives you a lot of more ideas of what to include in your advanced directive and things to think about once you come closer to the end of life. I really recommend it. And it just so happens that this library has it, so you don't have to go to Amazon and buy it. And they have some other books too that you might want to look at. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of YouTube videos if you're into that. There's another piece of paper that should be in your packets. It's called Resources and Tools for Advanced Healthcare Planning. It's something that we put together before the law was actually passed. But it has a lot of sources for you to look at and different websites to look at. I recommend looking through this and doing some more research. I gave you a broad outline. I hope you can use it, but there's more that you can look into if you want to. So any other questions? Were there any on from the Zoom participants?
No, Gary posted a link for a form in the chat.
Okay.
No questions.
Okay.
I guess you could invite people to unmute Zoom and ask a question in their voice if they would like to.
Okay. Janet just suggested that those of you on Zoom could unmute and we'll be able to hear your question if you have one. And if not, we'll stop recording and I'll be around if you'd like to ask any other questions. Thank you so much for coming.